Hello there and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Michelle Emerson and I love helping teachers with all things technology, organization, and productivity. For 7 years, I balanced being a teacher with fitness, grad school, running my own business, creating YouTube videos, having a podcast, wedding planning, and other things.
How is that even possible?
One of the number one questions I was constantly asked is, how do you establish balance? So that's what we're gonna talk about in today's video. I'm gonna share my insights on balance, what it means, how to establish it, how to maintain it, because that's super important, and just my general kind of tips that I can offer on the subject. Okay, let's just start by establishing that there's a big misconception surrounding balance. There's a lot of misconceptions actually surrounding balance, but the biggest one I have found is that a lot of people, especially teachers, think that there is this set of steps somewhere out there in the universe, and all they have to do is find that set of steps and follow it, and then they will magically achieve balance. Sounds great, right?
There's no such thing, is there?
The reality is, balance is something you constantly have to seek and then work in order to maintain. It's not something that you get and then just keep forever. It's something that is a constant work in progress, and it's not something that can be achieved by any single set of steps. Everyone's situation is different. Everyone's situation is constantly changing. So what I'm gonna do in this video, it's gonna be very laid back, by the way, just kind of chatty as if I'm talking with a friend. I'm gonna share with you 5 reminders when it comes to balance that have really helped me over the years, because I have had times in my life where I had a great balance, and I've had times in my life where I didn't. And that's the reality for most of us. So hopefully these reminders will resonate with you and help make your life just a little bit easier when it comes to establishing that balance. And if you see me looking at my phone, it's because I made a lot of notes. So the first reminder is that some balls are glass and some balls are plastic.
Wait, what?
You either know what I'm talking about or you don't have a clue. So this actually comes from a quote, and I believe the original quote was from an author, Nora Roberts, but I actually saw it on screenshots of Twitter posts. So I dropped my phone, hold on. Okay, I actually copied and pasted all of the text so that I could read it to you, because even though I could try to summarize it, I think it's best if you just hear it as is. So I'm gonna read this, it's kind of long, but it's worth hearing. One time, I was at a Q&A with Nora Roberts, and someone asked her how to balance writing and kids. And she said that the key to juggling is to know that some of the balls you have in the air are made of plastic and some are made of glass. If you drop a plastic ball, it bounces. No harm done. If you drop a glass ball, it shatters. So you have to know which balls are glass and which are plastic, and prioritize catching the glass ones. Nora was not talking about juggling 5 balls. She was talking about juggling 55 balls. The balls don't represent family or work. There are separate balls for everything that goes into each of these categories. Deadline on Project Y, or crazy sock day at school. Her point, addressing a room full of women, was not prioritize kids over work. It was some kid stuff is glass and some is plastic, and sometimes to catch a glass work ball, you have to drop a plastic family one, and that is okay. The reverse is also true. Sometimes to catch a glass kid ball, something at work has to slide, and that is okay too. If you are juggling 55 balls, some are going to drop. So you have to focus not on broad categories, but on the glass balls. I think about this all the time. I dropped more than 1 ball today. It is hard to drop any ball, and I hate it, but they were plastic, and tomorrow it will be okay. So to me, this quote or this analogy represents the fact that balance isn't about doing all of the things. It's not about doing it all, it's about prioritizing. There's always going to be responsibilities in our life that are glass, meaning they have to be a priority, and there are going to be responsibilities that are plastic and don't need to be a priority at that time. So you have to establish whether a responsibility is glass or plastic, and then you have to prioritize those glass balls. So I made a list just to kind of give an example of some of my glass balls and then some of my plastic balls. So an example of a glass ball for me, when I was teaching, grades and report cards. No ifs, ands, or buts, I have to get them done, right? There's deadlines. Professional development for the staff. So for a while I was the e-coach and I was responsible for putting on professional development. If I had a room full of teachers coming, I needed to make sure I was ready and I was prepared. My gym time, that has always been a glass ball for me. That is something that I refuse to drop because, to fit with the analogy, the rest of my life is going to shatter if I do not have that time to work on my physical and mental well-being. And then also date night. That's something I've always prioritized as a glass ball. Billy and I like to have a date night once a week. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes it's more like once a month, but when we have that scheduled, it's something that I make a priority. But some of my plastic balls would include planning extra fun activities. I always love to do these great games or just super engaging lessons with my students during like our academic flex time or morning meeting. But the reality is those were plastic balls, and if I had other responsibilities, those would have to get dropped. Planning far in advance. I did like to be a week planned in advance. Sometimes I even got 2 or 3 weeks planned, but the reality is as long as I knew what I was doing tomorrow, that's all that truly had to get done. So if planning super far in advance had to take a back seat due to other priorities, that was okay. Going to the grocery store. I do love going grocery shopping. I'm weird like that, but the reality is some weeks I didn't have time to go grocery shopping and Billy would have to take over that responsibility. The last one was watching a show at night. Billy and I have a habit of watching like Survivor or The Office or whatever other show we happen to be watching at the time. And while that is something I look forward to and I do enjoy, the reality is some nights, if I had other responsibilities, I wouldn't do it. So when we think about shifting our focus, if we're choosing to focus on family, that just means we're catching like a family glass ball. And if we're focusing on work, that means we're catching a work glass ball. What I really like about that quote is it's not about always choosing family or your personal time. There are glass balls for work that you have to catch, but there are also glass balls with your family and with your health and with all these different categories of your life. You have to figure out what individual tasks are most important and prioritize those rather than looking at it as a huge broad category. So in summary, reminder number 1, some balls are glass, some are plastic. Catch the glass ones, and it's okay if you drop the plastic ones. Reminder number 2 is that your priorities will shift. I said that word really weird, priorities. Your priorities will shift during different seasons of your life.
Winter is coming.
Now, seasons doesn't refer to like the actual seasons of summer, fall, winter, spring. It refers to how your life changes and evolves and adapts based on what's going on. And typically these seasons shift with big changes. And those could be big changes in your personal life, big changes in your work life. I cracked my finger, that kind of hurt. Big changes within your health. That's going to shift what season of life you're in. And when that season of life shifts, your priorities have to also shift. So balance doesn't mean everything being equal. And I have this set amount of time for work and this set amount of time for my health and this set amount of time for my family. It's about your priorities shifting in order to fit your needs during that season of life. So let me give you a couple of examples. During back to school time, that is a season of our lives, right? Every back to school season, we tend to have more work priorities than maybe personal priorities. And that just fits that season. We have so many things we have to get done. And a lot of the balls are glass, right? There are a lot of things we have to get prepared before students walk into our classroom. But if you have recently gotten married or recently had a kid or gotten a dog, your priorities may shift because you're in a different season of life and you may need to spend more time with your loved ones. You're gonna have more balls that are glass related to your family, whereas some work balls may become plastic. Even balls that used to be glass, things that maybe used to be a priority to you as a teacher, may now become plastic, and you may drop them because you realize that's no longer a priority in your current season of life. And that goes into reminder number 3. The transition between seasons is the hardest. So I love a good analogy. I'm gonna give a little analogy that actually my friend Bridget from the Letter Classroom came up with. We did a few different episodes on our podcast, Teaching to the Top, all about balance. And she had this paddleboard analogy. So her family has started doing more paddleboarding, and I myself have done paddleboarding, so I completely understood the analogy. She discussed how if you're starting on a boat, like a pontoon boat, it's a very stable surface. But as you transition onto a paddleboard, you're gonna be very shaky at first. You have to kind of catch your feet and be able to feel how the board is shifting and be able to adapt to that. That's a transition. That transition is difficult and it's going to be shaky, but once you get used to the paddleboard, it no longer feels as difficult. So when you have these transitions between different seasons of your life, that's when you're gonna feel most out of balance. That's when you're gonna feel overwhelmed and stressed, and you're gonna feel like you're being pulled in all these different directions. It's because you're transitioning seasons. And during that time, you're trying to figure out which balls are glass, which balls are plastic, how do my priorities need to shift in order to fit this season? So for example, when we transitioned from the end of summer, when we didn't really have glass work balls, all of our glass balls were with our personal life, and we transitioned to back to school time, that is a very shaky time. That is a difficult transition. And that's why teachers feel so overwhelmed and so stressed out and so tired mentally and physically. It's because they're transitioning between seasons. They're having to adjust their priorities in order to fit their needs. Another great example of this would be transitioning between grade levels. So if you've taught 4th grade for the past 5 years and you suddenly get moved to 2nd grade, you're gonna feel very out of balance because your priorities have to shift. So keep in mind that transitional time between seasons is going to be the hardest. So when you feel overwhelmed, you just have to remind yourself, I'm in a transitional period. It will get easier. I just have to shift out my priorities. So reminder number 4 is that balance looks different for everyone.
I'm losing my balance.
Now, Kevin,
Hey,
no.
And I think this is something we all know and we tell ourselves that, but I think we just need that reminder because we see someone else and we start to compare ourselves. But you have to keep in mind, what is a glass ball to you may be a plastic ball to someone else. What's a plastic ball to them may be a glass ball to you. For example, I mentioned that going to the gym is a glass ball for me. I refuse to let it drop.
Looking swole.
But for a lot of people, going to the gym or working out may be a plastic ball. It's like, yeah, if I have time and I can fit it in, great. If my juggling's on point and I can catch it, great. But if not, it's okay. I can let it drop. For me though, it's a glass ball, and that's because people have different priorities, and that depends on their season of life, their personality, their goals. There's so many different factors that play in to why balance looks different for everyone. You've probably heard the phrase like having too much on your plate. I think that's something we're all familiar with, but I've come to realize that we all have different size plates. And so everyone's plate tends to be full a lot of the time, but the reality is we all have different size plates. Your plate might be smaller than someone else's. So the amount of responsibilities it takes to fill your plate, or if you want to think back to the juggling analogy, the number of balls you can juggle is going to be different than someone else's. And again, that depends on so many different factors. So you cannot compare your priorities or your responsibilities to someone else's. And the 5th and final reminder, this ties back into what I said at the beginning. Balance is ongoing and requires work. Balance isn't like a state or an endpoint. It's a process. It's something that's constantly ongoing. And I mentioned that it requires work. And yes, it is hard. It is hard to establish balance. It is even harder to maintain balance as you're shifting through different seasons of life and your priorities are changing. It is hard. But the reality is there's always something that's hard, and you have to choose your hard. It's hard to establish balance, but guess what? It's also hard to not be in balance. It's hard to feel overwhelmed. It's hard to feel stressed out. It's hard to feel like you're being pulled in all these different directions. But you get to choose your hard. Personally, I would rather my hard be me seeking to establish and maintain balance rather than just dealing with the stress and the overwhelm. But there is good news to go along with that. Our bodies are naturally always seeking homeostasis, which is kind of like that natural balance. When you're dehydrated, your body is sending you signals, right? You're gonna feel thirsty. You're gonna want a drink of water.
Need some water.
And if we listen to those signals, it helps make that process a little bit easier. It's when we start to ignore those signals that can really make our mental and physical health decline. So if you're honest with yourself, you know when you are out of balance and you're not really doing anything to fix it. You know when you're ignoring those signals that something is out of balance, that you're not in homeostasis. The problem is we always try to justify it, right? We always try to say, yeah, but I just have to finish this one thing and then it'll get easier. Or, well, right now I have to do this. We try to make it seem like we, for some reason, are gonna be able to overpower that natural state. If we just work harder, we're gonna be able to be the one person that can do it all, despite what everyone has ever told us that we can't do it all.
I can do it myself. All right.
So if you truly listen to those signals and you follow those signals, it makes the process a lot easier. But ultimately, you get to choose your hard. It's hard to establish balance, but it's also hard to be out of balance. So choose your hard. So that is it. Those are my 5 reminders. Let's see if I can remember them all. Number 1, some balls are glass and some balls are plastic. Number 2, your priorities will shift during different seasons of your life. Number 3, the transition between seasons is the hardest. Number 4, balance looks different for everyone. And number 5, balance is ongoing and requires work. I did it. I hope that this was helpful for you. Again, there's no magical set of steps. I wish I could give it to you, I really do, but it's something that you're constantly going to be seeking in your life, and that's okay. Just remind yourself the things that I talked about in this video, and I think it makes the process just a little bit easier. But if you did find this helpful, please give it a thumbs up. That really helps me to know what types of videos you want to see on my channel. While you're at it, go ahead and subscribe, hit the notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. Please share this video out with any of your teacher friends if you did find it helpful. And as always, thank you for watching. I love you all so much. Don't forget to put your positive pants on, and I will catch you